So now, the Peter passage this week feels for me very on the nose for a Sunday that we will remember those who have fallen in war. This is our Memorial Day weekend, and so we call to mind all of those that we have lost or who have perished during wartime. And also, we are marking those this weekend who have lost their lives as a result of the COVID virus, starting in March. And this may soon be 100,000 people, maybe before the end of this month. And friends, even locally to this church right now, we are grasping with some changes and some sad things that we have to mourn. We're struggling to delay and losses of summer programming. This is a year that we aren't going to be able to do Reach. The picture you see here is from Reach last year. It was a panoramic view of all of the people who were together during praise time. And also, Vacation Bible School is going to be delayed. We don't know what's happening yet, and right now doesn't seem like the safest time to have a bunch of children and a bunch of volunteers working together. And so we're going to wait until August until we have a chance to be together. However, in the midst of all we've talked about to this point, Christ being ahead of us, we talked about in John, the Spirit with us now, that time for the Trinity is not the same as us. And so the Trinity is in our future, is in our present, and in our past. We've not talked a whole lot about what do we do right now. How do we live our lives in this present moment? I think because 1 Peter is particularly on the nose, that perhaps this might be a good passage to walk through together. And so this will be a little different. I'm not usually an expository pastor. I don't usually go line by line, but today seemed to be a good day to do that as we are thinking about more and more what does it mean to be in a new normal. So if you split this 1 Peter passage up in two sections, which conveniently in the lectionary it is, there's 1 Peter 4, 12 through 14, and 1 Peter 5, 6 through 11, we have two different things to consider. And I think the first part of the Peter passage is to talk about why. By the way, say Peter passage 3 times fast. The first part of our Peter passage gives us a why, while the second part of the passage gives us a how. So the first part of the passage says, "Beloved, do not be surprised." And this translates more as, don't be afflicted with novelty. We should not be shocked, friends, that difficult things can happen. This should be no surprise to us if we live long enough. At a certain point, we have to remember that though we are redeemed and beloved and forgiven, the world is still broken. The world is still imperfect. And no, this virus is not the result of God deciding to punish God's people. The world is imperfect. It's fallen. And so bad things do occur in this world, and it turns out that they will happen to us. So we shouldn't be shocked that it happens. We shouldn't be so affected by the novelty of this moment that it seems to have us wander out with our heads in the clouds. Then the second thing Peter talks about is rejoice insofar as you're sharing in Christ's sufferings. I don't know about you, but as much as I'd like to think that I have gotten to a point where I can rejoice in suffering, I still haven't gotten there yet. I got to be honest with you, I don't quite miss the gym all that much because I don't miss the day after going to the gym. I don't miss the soreness in my chest or the soreness in my arms, my muscles trying to recover. I don't miss the suffering. I don't rejoice in that day, even though I know that it's leading to something better for my body. When we do try to do this rejoicing, I think sometimes it's often a fake it till you make it kind of thing. We are trying so hard to rejoice in something, but like the horse who sticks an ice cream cone to the forehead, hoping it'll be a unicorn, sometimes to rejoice in suffering, we fake it till we make it. And that would leave us really lonely in this process, right? As if somehow this is all on us. But I think there's another way to hear that statement, that while we should rejoice because we're sharing in Christ's sufferings, it is equally true that Jesus Christ shares in our sufferings. This is not, something that is not mutual. Jesus Christ, fully God, fully human, has been exposed to the same pains, the same difficulties that we have right now. God is not somewhere on a cloud watching all of this happen and saying, well, let's hope for the best. I'll just keep hearing as many prayers as I can, and we'll just believe that it'll be okay. No, Christ is here with us. God is here with us. The Spirit is here with us. We aren't alone in this time or any time that we suffer. If you are pained by the fact that you still cannot gather here in this space, Christ is with you. If you are pained by the fact that the world that you were expecting this summer is not happening, Christ is with you in that suffering. You are not alone, thanks be to God. And that reversal is worth celebration, is worth rejoicing, that in our suffering we don't do it alone. I wish I could say that would make it simple and we could be done, but Peter continues and says, if you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory, which is the Spirit of God, is resting on you. Now that word reviled, we don't use too often, but a better way to translate it from the Greek would be harshly criticized. More often than not, as people of faith, we will stand against a cultural tide, because our gospel invites us to preference the weak over the strong, to invite the outcast to the center of the circle, to not ignore those who everybody else would choose to ignore. As I talked about a couple weeks ago, it may be that our masks that we wear together might be a way that we show week in and week out that we care about those who see themselves as vulnerable. We don't do it in a shameful way. But so easy to be criticized by that. So easy to be told that we're living in fear, that we don't care about ourselves, that our rights should be the ones that go forward as opposed to the responsibilities that we share for others. And the fact that we talk about these issues in faith, sensitive issues that hold dear to our hearts, the values about freedom and community, that we are willing to talk about them, also leave us susceptible to the criticism of this world. The further that we drift, friends, from what cultural standards are out there, the more that we will be criticized. And we shouldn't be surprised when that happens. Look at the Gospels. Look at the cross. And remember that Jesus went against the cultural tide too. So in sum, Peter is telling us that bad things are going to happen, and we shouldn't act as though they aren't. And if we respond with the gospel, with the good news at the center, we're likely to be criticized harshly. Thumb down, boo to you. So then how do we manage in these times of difficulty? The first thing that we should probably do is, according to Peter, is be humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you in due time. This is a picture here of a priest who is prostrating himself at the foot of the altar. This would be in the Roman Catholic tradition. But you notice that he is all the way on the ground. He's acting as a representative of Jesus Christ in that tradition, yet still he is on the ground. This idea of humility is not the humble brag. It's not the, well, I'm so humbled that you all think that I'm amazing. Yeah, that's not humility. That's just arrogance wrapped up in a nicer word. Instead, what humility is an idea that we are bringing ourselves intentionally to a lower station. We place ourselves in step with those who are helpless, powerless, and perceived as insignificant. Friends, I fear that what is going to happen during this crisis, as those who are more likely to get this virus will be the ones that get pushed aside as we continue to our new normal. That somehow those who are ill, those who have other conditions, will be ignored because we have to do too much for them. Instead, what is it like to humble ourselves, even if we are the strong and the safe? We go beside them and we say, I am with you. I humble myself in order to care for you. Because the temptation will be to harshly criticize those as we would be harshly criticized ourselves. The next thing Peter talks about is that we should, as I mentioned before, yeet our anxiety. The word here isn't really good as cast. This is not a fishing pole that we send out in the hope of catching something. Instead, this is a hard, violent throw. When I think of the word hurl, I think of my body convulsing, sending this stuff out. We should throw our anxieties as hard as we can to God because God can catch them. And it doesn't mean that we won't feel anxious or frustrated or concerned or scared. These are all emotions that we have as human beings. But if they become overwhelming, if they become difficult, we can violently throw them to God, knowing God will take them because God cares for us. The next thing Peter talks about is to discipline ourselves and keep alert. The better word here is not discipline, but literally sober up. Get your mind right. We encourage one another to look at the circumstances right in the eye, knowing that there very well be a lion seeking to devour. That this is a broken world, that it is not imperfect, but we are here together. So we discipline ourselves, we sober up, we look at the reality of the circumstance, and we try to make decisions together. The next thing Peter reminds us of is that we aren't alone. Friends, there are millions of people, millions of churches that are trying to work through this time just as you are, just as I am, just as we are here in this room right now. We've never had to do this alone. And finally, remember, friends, that this time will end. Even if we don't know what the end is. Sometime this will be over. Sometime we will be able to get together again and celebrate. Fire around the fireplace, experiencing joy face to face again. Sometime this will be over. Christ, who goes before us, who prepares a place for us, who promised us that we wouldn't be orphaned, will come back and will make things better. And these words that we see at the end of Peter read again like a master carpenter busy about his work. Jesus Christ will reset our foundations. That's what that word establish means for us. Our cornerstones, our foundations, the places that have been chipped away will be restored for us. We will be healed. We will be made better, and we will be strengthened. The beams in our lives that are sagging will be built back up again by the master carpenter who knows better than anybody else how to care for us. The gospel passage today reminds us that who Christ is, he gives to us. So the question that remains for us today as we walk forward through this uncertain time is how we can still be people who are restoring, supporting, strengthening, and establishing each other. Friends, Reach is coming home. The work that we do to repair each other's homes, now we do to repair one another's hearts. We teach one another these simple but complicated lessons of how to do the right thing to have a safe place to call home. Reach is still among us, friends. Just because we're not going away doesn't mean that the work of repair still doesn't need to happen. And here's the greatest part. It's not just for the teenagers. It's not just for the volunteers. It's for all of us. Here is your Reach Summer. It is time to start thinking about ways that we restore, support, strengthen, and establish one another. Repair foundations that seem that they're coming askew. The leaky roofs of our hearts can be patched over again. And friends, that doesn't mean that it has to happen in the way that we got used to back in March. In fact, this may be the time that we learn how to do it, because just like Reach, where we have to go away because it helps us understand things and it brings more clarity to the moment, perhaps the fact that you can't be here right now may open you up to a world of care that you might not have imagined in February. So what does it mean, friends, for you to restore, support, strengthen, and establish each other? That is the church. That is the gospel. And that is where I hope and pray we set our minds to in the coming weeks and coming months. Thanks be to God.